We were simply asking for a meeting with Vision Beyond to get more time to move and a little help with moving expenses where we got none. Now we have our eviction date is August 19th, and now they are suing each and every tenant in the building for $10,000 worth of damage, which we don't understand because they have not evaluated anyone's apartment. I can't believe that you on city council in this city are treating your citizens this way to a group of developers called Vision and Beyond who brag about how the rights, tenants have no rights in Cincinnati and they can do whatever they want. It's a shame, and all of you should be ashamed of yourself. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. The next speaker is Janiyah Miller.
Hi, I've been the one who's been leading some of the organizing efforts with the Courtview tenants, and I share the same. At Courtview, they're still fighting. They're fighting hard. Some of them aren't here today because they're mentally and physically exhausted. They're sick. Displacement takes a real toll on your mental well-being and health. The owners came to the building about a week ago, and we have some of it on video. One of the most notable things that they said, they looked one of the tenants in the eye and said, "You have no rights. This is Ohio. Tenants do not have rights here." And that they can do whatever they want because this is their building. And then following that, the next day, they took out the washer and dryers there. And so that's why one of the tenants can't be here today, because he had to take a bus to go wash his clothes, because now that's a service that they aren't offering. A lot of what they're doing is retaliatory. There are other Vision and Beyond tenants across the city who are experiencing similar things as Courtview. This isn't an isolated or siloed incident, and so I believe people on council have the ability in the mayor to do what's right, to create and push effective policy change, because that's all I hear. Before I came here, I spoke with Tim, one of the residents, and he said he'll be fighting for these issues until the day he dies, and that he wants to see real policy change, that he doesn't want to see lip service from people that he voted for, that he helped elect, because he's a constituent that matters too. So that's something that I want you all to think about. I also want you to think about doing an ordinance that says that you won't do business with Vision and Beyond, as they bragged on YouTube that this is a place to do what they're doing.
Hey everybody, we are getting started here, so go ahead and share this stream, and welcome. We want to say welcome to the Mona and Mark Show. We're glad that you're with us today. Please use the comments for questions and any comments that you have, either whether you're on YouTube or Facebook. Please go ahead and share this right now so that we can make sure that as many people get caught up with what's going on this week as possible. So we are excited to be here today. We have several different topics that we're going to talk about. But the first thing we want to make sure we're reminding everybody is that we need you to become part of your community council. This is really important because we know that the community council is often the first place where information comes about development that's coming in, people who are being displaced out of the neighborhood, and it's often one of the only places where you have legal standing or a voice to talk about what's going on. So we have started this project, the 9K project, where we're asking all 9,316 people who voted for issue 3 to join their community councils today. And part of that is because we want to make sure people are in the know, that you're reporting back to your neighbors about what's going on, but also because we want to make sure that every community council adopts and uses the Equitable Development Rubric.
Absolutely. And as you just saw in the clip, with the residents who were getting displaced out of Court Street, that's one of many incidents that are happening across several neighborhoods in the city. Dr. Mark, are you trying to silence me? One of many, right? And so we want tenants, residents to know that they have a right to show up in city council to share their voice about how they feel. And it's, we don't want to wait until the last minute. And if we're aware of our rights way in advance, we're able to participate in that process. So, and hopefully save housing or make it as easy as possible to find a new location for folks. So it's hard when you get displaced. It's very traumatizing. It's physically and mentally draining, as it was mentioned in that clip. And we all don't want folks to go through that, right? So the more that we are aware and are proactively trying to prevent that from happening, the better chances we are supporting our neighbors throughout the communities.
Absolutely. And we're fortunate because there are trainings coming up that Peaslee is putting together about the Equitable Development Rubric, specifically how communities and community councils can use the rubric. We use it here in Over the Rhine when we have a developer that comes in. We use the developer questionnaire, and that just allows us to get information about the project and know what's going to be happening in our community. And that is so important, right? We need to make sure that every development that comes through is thoroughly vetted by the community so it doesn't have a disparate impact, especially on Black and Brown communities here in Cincinnati and beyond. So that's one thing that we want you all to do, is go to PeasleeCenter.org right now and sign up for their Equitable Development Rubric trainings. And they have trainings for the neighborhoods that have adopted the rubric so far. And then they also have trainings for those who are interested in adopting the rubric. So we want to make sure that everybody does that, because it's so important for this rubric to be used. And the immediate benefits of using this rubric is that the amount of information that tenants get and residents get in a community is increased. Whether that's the financial information about the development, or whether that's how the development's footprint looks like, the environmental impact, right? The jobs that are associated with that development. This needs to be known right away. How much affordable housing is going to be part of that, right? What kind of amenities are going to be accessible to people in the community or in that development? All that stuff is really important. So this rubric guidebook and toolkit was released a couple weeks ago, and it is definitely something that anybody can use. And so you go to tinyurl.com/edrubric2021. I put that link together so you can go ahead and check that out. And it's really a great tool, and I just encourage everyone to look into it and to check it out. So
I'm already signed up. I'm signed up for the 18th since Walnut Hills has already adopted it. So trainings are on the 18th of August and also the 25th. So check it out.
So I'm signed up. We must be in the same training then, because Over the Rhine has also adopted it. So we will be in that training together. So
look at that. Friends together.
I know, right? I'm excited.
A friend. Yeah.
And I'm ready to use it even more strongly, right? So in our Economic Development and Housing Committee, we are committed to using the developer questionnaire, which is so important. We are going to just kind of keep this moving. We have some exciting news to let people know that we are united around the Action for Housing Now and our affordable housing campaign here in Cincinnati. And what does that mean, we are united? So if you remember issue 3, there was a lot of disinformation and misinformation that came out against issue 3. Now, the reality is those same individuals are now on our team, and we are working with the unions. We are working with as many community organizations as possible. Our member organizations have been at the table since the very beginning, making suggestions, using their lived institutional knowledge. And so for us here, we are excited because this is a new day. Now, we know we're going to talk a little bit about what City Hall did and did not do this week in a few moments, but we know that if we work together, we can end homelessness. And the only way that we can do that is through affordable housing. The only way that we can do that is through livable wages. And the only way we can do that is through housing protections, right? So those three pieces are key for us to eradicate homelessness. Without affordable housing, without livable wages, and without housing protections, we will not end homelessness. Now, what those housing protections look like can be very hyper local. It could be something that's specific to a neighborhood or to a city, but the state of Ohio needs to act. The federal government needs to act on housing protections, or we will continue to see people being forced from their home. And in many times, that's just because somebody puts an investment in and they want a return on their investment. So as we think about how we're going to make our communities more stable, we have to look at both affordable housing and the livable wages piece, but also the housing protections piece as well. So we're really excited that we're on the same page with the unions, and we will be working together to create the solution to fund the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Now, we'll talk a little bit at the end of this about what are some of the other obstacles with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and on the administrative side, but we wanted to make sure that you all knew that the people who came out against issue 3 are now for affordable housing, and they're together with us at the table. So that's pretty exciting. I don't know, Mona, do you have anything to add to that, or are you just as excited as I am about it?
I am just as excited as you are.
Awesome. So we've been getting a couple questions, and Mona, this is kind of for you. So we're going to move into our frequently asked questions section here. And we've been getting some questions about the operations at the Homeless Coalition. So what's going on with the mail, what's going on with education, which I can talk about in a few minutes. But if you wanted to just let people know, how is COVID-19 and what's happening with the new variants, the Delta variant, all that stuff, what kind of impact is that having on the Homeless Coalition and maybe some of our member organizations as well?
Sure. So we, effective July 1st, which is the beginning of our fiscal year, we came back into the office, but we are still using safety protocols. So regardless of what CDC says, we're still operating as if we are, still, well, we still do. We still have these variants coming out, right? It's Delta, Lambda, Gamma, all of these. So we are open back to the public Monday through Friday. We're only operating out of the window, so you can still pick up your mail Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So we're no longer on restricted hours. Before we had restricted days. So Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So you can stop in and pick up your mail or ask our front desk staff any questions that you may have. We are trying to be mindful. Our member agencies realize that our folks still need that assistance, right? And are not sure where to go. So we're getting flyers, which are great, that we are posting in our front windows. So those are going to be available 24 hours, right? So we want to make sure that, some folks may not be able to come in 9 to 5, or maybe they're not getting mail, but still want the latest information and don't have access to a phone to call or to a computer. So check out our windows. We are posting information as far as where you can go to get utility assistance, rent assistance, food, clothing, anything you may need. So, and if you're looking for something specifically, give us a call. Wait until, if I don't answer it, wait until you can leave a voicemail message and leave me a message, and I will call you back within 24 to 48 hours. So what's going on with education?
Well, we have been doing some in-person events, some in-person speakers. We've definitely been doing in-person tours for groups up to about 20 people. But with the Delta variant coming in, I definitely am trying to focus on doing more of the the virtual trainings, the virtual speakers. So we also have virtual tours. So if anyone wants to do those, please check out our page, cincyhomeless.org/about/education. And you can fill out the form that simply says, this is what I'm interested in, and these are the dates that I would like it. We've done this with church groups and school groups and universities. And we are open to any group of people who want to learn more about homelessness. They want to learn more about affordable housing. They want to learn more about gentrification. They want to learn more about historical and contemporary racism and discrimination in housing. So these are what our tours and our trainings and our speakers allow people to do and encourage people to do. So please check out our education program, sign up for some virtual events. And we are always looking for more people to partner with. So that would be awesome. So that's really what's going on with us here.
And one thing is, we are still requiring masks to be worn over the mouth and the nose, hand sanitizer, because, you know, a lot of the folks that we serve are high risk. So that's another thing where it's like, yes, maybe the CDC has said it's okay. We at the Homeless Coalition realize that, you know, who we serve are at high risk, and we want to do everything we can to try to protect folks. And so we're still requiring masks and hand sanitizer and masks to be worn over the mouth and the nose.
So we just got a question from Samantha who said affordable housing would be a new ballot item during an upcoming election ? And absolutely true, right? So when we are looking for funding, we want to ask the people to co-sign on that, right? We wouldn't want the funding just to come at the expense of someone else without having the people make that decision. So in November, we are likely not going to see anything on the ballot, because for us to collect another 10,000 signatures, get that on the ballot in the next 3 or 4 months, especially with the Delta variant, it doesn't seem like it's likely possible. We will also talk a little bit in a moment about City Hall's inability to put it on the ballot for November this week. What happened on Wednesday? There was the opportunity for a 0.1% increase of the earnings tax to go on the ballot and let the people choose. Unfortunately, 7 out of 9 of our council members did not want us to have the ability to choose whether or not we would vote for that 0.1% earnings increase. So whether that was because they don't want to be seen as having a hand in raising taxes, right, because it still would be the people voting on that, or what, they chose not to allow the 0.1% earnings increase to go to the ballot this week. So that's kind of disappointing, but we know that
that's absolutely disappointing. You know, I'm sorry, I'm about to give me 2 minutes in here. We have an affordable housing crisis, which when we were trying to do the ballot initiative, we were gaslighted and told, oh, is there really an affordable housing crisis? We're not sure about it. But you all have been using the same research that we have that shows that there has been an issue, right? Why did the Affordable Housing Trust Fund come about in the first place? Because of the research that said we had an issue. And because of the research that said it is primarily affecting Black and poor people in our city. So then issue 3 comes up, and all of a sudden we forget about it and we act like we don't know about it. But then they said, oh, no, vote no on that. But we do think we need affordable housing, but this isn't the right way. We have yet to see a right way. So the people came with another solution. Let's do 1.1%, right? Because that was actually 0.3% was what we were looking for, because that was what was used for the transportation, which got switched to Hamilton County, right? Now we're saying, okay, let's just take that and put it towards affordable housing. And so to not even get the 0.1%, beyond disheartening. And, that's something to think about coming in this upcoming election of if you're not for the people, who are you for? And why should we re-elect you? I'm going to be quite honest with it, because this personally affects folks, their livelihood, not only their livelihood, ability to live and move in spaces every day, but their ability to exist. And what you are saying is that you are not worthy enough to exist. So think about that, y'all. Keep that in mind, and let's really try to get into the practice of taking care of one another. And I think this was one way we could have shown that. And so I'm really, really beyond disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, because it was basically the very smallest amount that you could even ask for
exactly
put on there, and we couldn't even do it, right? We didn't even have the political will to do that. And the excuses against it were absolutely ridiculous, saying things like, well, with COVID, people lost some of their income. Well, that's why they need housing, right? That's why they need safe and stable housing. The same reasons you're giving against this idea are the same reasons that we need the idea, right? So you're just weaponizing people's suffering against them and saying, well, you're not suffering enough, or, if you just picked yourself up and got a better job and whatever, then we wouldn't be in this situation. But the reality is that people who are making minimum wage cannot afford a 2-bedroom apartment working full time anywhere in the United States. So it's a math problem issue, but it's a moral problem issue as well, right? So if we don't have a livable wage, we don't have access to affordable housing, and we don't have the housing protections that we need, we're in the situation that, Vision and Beyond's putting people in Court Street and Mount Auburn across the, 1,200 units that they bought in the last 2 years. And that is going to continue unabated unless we step in and do something about that. Now, there have been some calls from at the federal level to create, Maxine Waters, she's put out this, we're going to end homelessness by 2025 by doing so. If you're interested in looking at it from a policy perspective, I would suggest looking this up and looking up how they want to do that, funding different types of programs, expanding voucher program. But ultimately, it would make housing an entitlement, right? So that you would be guaranteed housing, safe and affordable housing in the United States. And that is a big difference from, less than 25% of people who are eligible for housing support actually get it, right? So, most people don't actually get housing support, but if it was an entitlement, that could change. So looking at some of the laws and stuff that they're trying to pass at the national level, but we know that there's an issue. Like, we don't need more plans and studies to determine what the issue is. What we need is the simple things of, just cause protection, pay to stay ordinance. We need inclusionary zoning, rent control, community power, equitable development. Rubric needs to be used in all development. And we need to demand that you cannot get an abatement or public land or a variance, any of those things, if you're displacing the tenants that live there, right? So there are actual concrete things that we can do, and we don't need another study to tell us, right? We don't need another study to tell us that people are suffering. We don't need another study to tell us that people are experiencing homelessness, that someone is taking their cart with all their belongings down the street tonight looking for a piece of pizza in the garbage can. We don't need another study to see what our experience is, right? Like to validate our experience. What we need is action. And the only way that we're going to get that action is if we work from that community level and start building this process, building this movement even stronger. And that's the way that we're going to do that, because things like this, which I'm about to add here, this eviction moratorium, right? So you might have heard that the eviction moratorium was extended at the, after it expired over the weekend, and this week they extended it to September 31st. But here in Hamilton County, the courts have decided that they are not going to respect or adhere to the CDC eviction moratorium. They decided that they're not going to honor that moratorium. So even though you might have heard that there was an eviction moratorium extended, they are not even going to follow those rules here in Hamilton County. So we know that Black women are the folks who are most impacted by evictions. We know evictions will stay on your record for the rest of your life unless we can come up with better legislation to protect people to make sure that they're not kicked out of their homes just because they want wealthier, whiter people moving into this building, like on Court Street. We want to make sure that the policies that the city is not encouraging people, like our abatement policy, which encourages people to flip affordable housing into market rate housing and luxury housing. And we need to make sure that we have protections at the state level as well, so that we're not just relying on cities cobbling together piece by piece, but the state of Ohio and the Commonwealth of Kentucky and Indiana, that they have strong tenant rights, so that people aren't pushed out of their homes. And until that happens, until we have housing court, until we have these kinds of protections, it's just going to continue unabated. And Cincinnati loses over 1,000 Black residents every year by design, right? This is because people are being pushed out of their homes. This is not because people accurately realize that there's no upward mobility for Black people in Cincinnati, and that's why they're leaving, but they're actually just getting pushed out, and that's why they're leaving and having to go to places like Virginia, Tennessee, and Indiana and stuff like that. So there is, you might want to check out, there's a comment here saying, there's a podcast on affordable housing crisis from a national perspective. Ezra Klein of New York Times interviewed them. If you don't have a New York Times subscription, you won't be able to check this out. But if you do, maybe go check it out. You look up Ezra Klein on NYT and check that out, because it is a crisis across the country, right? This is not just happening here. We've lost more than half of all affordable housing in the last 10 years. And I could say that every 10 years, right? So every year we're just losing more and more affordable housing. So the other question here is, how does Hamilton County just opt out of the moratorium? So they're using the legal defense that came out of Cleveland a few months ago. And the reason why they stopped honoring the moratorium before was they said that there's, legal compelling interest of the landlords. And so they're going to make sure that the landlords get paid, even though the eviction moratorium allowed and encouraged people to work with the landlords and the tenants to make sure that they got that federal funding that from the CARES Act and the ARP that allowed people to pay back rent, but also current and future rent on if you lost your income due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's kind of why they were able to do it, is because a court in Cleveland said, hey, we think that it's more compelling that landlords and property owners have ownership rights over their properties. So unfortunately, that's kind of what they were working on and doing that. And we know, of course, that the big picture is that we have to fight for racial equity. That needs to be at the baseline of everything, whether that's in housing, education, transportation, policing, right? These things are the bedrock. I would say these things, I want to say anti-Black racism is the bedrock of America. And so until we address that, we're not going to get into a place where we even have anything close to equality, but let alone equity. So those livable wages and housing protections and affordable housing is really important, but then also addressing that white generational wealth in the suburbs that's coming into the cities across this country that has so much wealth that the cities are saying, we need more luxury housing. We need more market rate housing to accommodate basically these weekend city dwellers, right, that are coming in to party or whatever, or have their Airbnb here in our neighborhood, which is a little bit frustrating for sure. Oh, on that last slide, I did put on here that the Regional Chamber of Commerce came out with these guiding principles for regional growth. You don't necessarily need to look them up. They are definitely, let me see if I can pull this up real fast. What was it called?
I think it's definitely an interesting read.
Right.
Wouldn't say it's, I always like to read things that I support and things that I don't support, right? To kind of understand the perspective. And even after reading that, I just don't get it. I don't get it. Again, it's collective thoughts, right? Or collective processes, or living in a collective, thinking as a collective is my mindset. So to read something like that, it's really, I'm challenged in understanding how that was written. So I would love for folks to read that and to come back and give us some questions that you may have or thoughts that you may have after reading that. Hey, Kelly.
Hey, welcome. Good to see you. And the thing about that study as well, or study, why did I even call it a study? Oh my gosh. That the document from the Chamber of Commerce is it had a very specific purpose, and the purpose was to say that market rate housing increases affordability. So their ideological bent is to say, well, if we just build more market rate housing, it'll increase affordability. And they use these papers, these position papers, to justify that. And it's really disheartening that City Council, Betsy Sunderman, this week, she chose to quote from this document. And one of the things that is really frustrating is she quoted the document, but the document itself quotes a policy paper, and that policy paper is from a think tank, and that think tank is about employment, and it's not even about housing, right? So they're just cherry picking different things. I'm sure they just go to Google and then they put in quotes, market rate helps affordable housing, then ends the quotes, and then they pull up whatever garbage you find on the internet to justify their really, did I say Satanism in my head? But like, we haven't done this show long enough, but to justify these deeds that they're going to do, and to justify displacing people from the communities, and just saying if we just have market rate housing, we're going to increase affordability. But when we're in a 40,000 unit shortage in our county, like, that doesn't matter. And if you write a 50-page document and the only thing that you say in here about race is that Black families are more likely to be renters, then you're not actually doing something in the community, right? Like, you were just extending white supremacy further. You're using data, fake data, whatever. You're using these data points to explain your ideology and put it just out there. So when number 8 of their principles is market rate development is not the enemy of affordability, that right there is a very loaded, telling sentence, right? That they're saying enemy, right? And instead of saying, that there could be a symbiosis or whatever. But the goal of the Chamber of Commerce in this report or study, whatever, principles for regional housing, is really just to say that we need to subsidize market rate housing and luxury housing at higher levels, right? In Cincinnati, over 90% of all subsidies go to market and luxury housing, right? So we subsidize market and luxury housing already, and most housing is subsidized. If you own your home and you write off your interest that you pay for your mortgage on your taxes, that's a subsidy, right? So we're already subsidizing market rate and luxury housing at a tune to more than 9 of every $10 that we put towards housing, both at the federal level and at the local level here. So keep that in mind. I'm still laughing about that I said that they were, what are they doing? They're just kicking people out. Is that like what Satan does? I don't know.
Somebody evil.
Somebody's bad about that. It's not good, I can tell you that much.
So Dr. Mark, what happened yesterday? Well, today's Friday, 2 days ago. Ooh,
2 days ago. So City Hall was going to, are you talking about this, about the 0.1% earnings?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so basically City Hall was going to allow us, thank you so much, they were going to allow us to vote on, so Chris Seelbach put together this ordinance that would say, look, in November, the city of Cincinnati voters could vote on adding 0.1% to the earnings tax, and then that would allow for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to get about $20 million a year. So over 10 years, that's going to be a pretty sizable amount, right? So this was going to end. It was going to sunset in about 9 or 10 years. The interesting thing about it is, Sealback's office during issue 3 had, one of the people that works there, got on a thread with me and said, if you had just determined that the funding was coming from the earnings tax and that it ended at a certain day, this would, in this person's word, be a slam dunk. So now you all decided, because everyone's wanted to tell us why we're doing it wrong. You're not collaborating enough. We've had meetings on this for 4 years, and we have invited everybody to the table to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund for 4 years, right? So everyone had an idea of why this wasn't going to pass. But, they said this would be a slam dunk if we said it's coming from the earnings tax and it's gonna end at a certain time. Unfortunately, as we saw, that this ordinance did not pass this week, right? So with the Affordable Housing's Advocate of the Year, David Mann, voting against it, you had everyone voting against it except for Chris Sealback and Michelle Lemon Kearney were the only 2 people who voted for putting it on the ballot in November. And of course, they said everything was wrong about it. And in this country, as we're finding out, is if you say anything about taxes, all of a sudden it is going to not be politically feasible for a politician. So what do you think about it?
One thing, it's they were voting to just get it on the ballot to let the people choose. For them to not even be willing to let the people choose, mind-blowing. And what do you lose by having this issue on the ballot? One more point. There's nothing. It's just saying, hey, you know what? I agree that the people should choose. And what voting against it to me is saying that you don't want the people to have a voice, and you're supposed to be representing that voice. So again, just mind-blowing. And it's 0.1%. And, when we asked for 0.3%, it's raising it to 2.1, which the earnings tax was already at 2.1 because of the transportation, right? But then that got moved to the county. And so to me, there are certain things that are of value that I'm worth paying for. I will pay for things that help benefit highways, transportation, things that are community assets. And to me, this is a community asset, right? Because it's building the people. Because when we have safe and affordable housing, we are able to thrive, not just survive. And that's the difference. This is basically enabling folks to not just survive, but to thrive in life. So, yeah, I don't know what's to come next, but that was just mind-blowing for me.
Yeah, and the thing about it too is that an earnings tax is actually more fair than a sales tax. So when the Metro levy got moved to a sales tax, what that means is people with lower incomes spend a higher percentage of their income on that sales tax, whereas an earnings tax is a flat rate. So no matter how much you make, that percentage is the same. So when they actually moved the bus levy to a sales tax, that actually hurts low-income people more than if it stayed as an earnings tax. So as an earnings tax, asking for this as an earnings tax, for me, seems a more equitable thing. I would hope we would never say we want to add it to an earnings tax, because that burdens low-income families more than if it was just an earnings tax. So sales tax, bad. Hurts low-income families more, higher percentage of their income goes towards it. Whereas this was an earnings tax, which is more equitable and more fair across the board. So just keep that in mind. So we do have, obviously we had this plan that we've been working on for 5 years. about how we're going to fund affordable housing and how we're going to make it equitable and all that kind of stuff. And our plan had dedicated funds for affordable housing. We wanted to make sure that people in affordable housing had just cause eviction protections, which means that you work with your landlord, you figure out the issues, and then before it even gets to court, right? We also wanted to make sure that there were livable wages guaranteed in all the jobs, whether it be construction or management or whatever goes in those buildings, but that they're equity focused as well, and that the board would be controlled by the community, and then those units would remain affordable forever. Now, many of you have heard that the city is investing $35 million of a HUD loan into affordable housing. You also might have heard that the city is saying that they are going to get $30 million in private investment to go into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. But did you know that $0 in both those situations, $35 million from HUD and loan and $35 million or $30 million in raising in private equity, none of those dollars, not $1, not 1% of those dollars is allocated to go to 0 to 60% AMI. Literally, they can spend 100% of the dollars that the city is bragging about in their $35 million HUD loan or in what they're raising from private resources, that 100% of it can go for market and luxury housing, because we do not have a community controlled housing board. So when the city manager said that we are going to commit 51% of the $35 million to 80% AMI, she was saying that we are going to commit just over half of it to workforce housing or market rate housing. There was no commitment whatsoever in that to create affordable housing. So would you be surprised that city council members and the city manager's office are lying to you about actually making a commitment towards affordable housing? Because that's what they've done. They've literally pulled the wool over people's eyes, where people are saying we are making this, $70 million commitment towards affordable housing, and literally not $1 in that has to go to affordable housing. They can build businesses, they can build parking garages, but not $1 of this city hall plan is going towards affordable housing. Not one single dollar. And in fact, they said that deeply affordable units are too expensive and they wouldn't even look into those. So not $1 of the $70 million that the city is saying that they're putting towards affordable housing will go towards affordable housing. Mark my words. I want you to come back 2-3 years from now after WCPO or somebody, WVXU or Street Vibes does a report on it, and they say, look, we are doing an audit of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and we are finding out that none of it went towards affordable housing. Not $1 of it is going towards affordable housing. But everybody will say, oh, we're putting this money, we're getting this HUD loan that we have to pay back against future affordable housing or future developments. And so it's just, I don't know. I'm at a loss for words.
Aren't we all?
Key says they don't want input from the people, and affordable housing is not a city priority, and it should be, right? Absolutely, it should be. We've seen too many of our neighbors being pushed out of our communities. And Key's saying we need those deeply affordable units at 0 to 30% AMI, which is absolutely true, because we are short in our county over 40,000 units, basically in that range, right? So that we know that there are families that are struggling, that are paying more than 30% of their income towards their housing, because they do not have the available affordable housing that is necessary. So don't believe the hype is what I'm trying to tell you when the city's saying we're putting tens of millions of dollars into affordable housing, because the reality is that they are not required to do that. So they're going to take out a loan and saying this loan is for affordable housing, and they can literally just build luxury and market rate housing and businesses and parking garage with that money. And that's what they will do. So until we make sure that the Housing Advisory Board represents the people, and they come up with priorities and saying we want to do 0 to 60% AMI, there's not $1 dedicated to affordable housing in that situation today.
And that's part of the reason why they leave us out of that, right? And so they don't want that that pushback. They don't want the truth. And the fact that a lot of that funding needs to be dedicated towards the 0 to 30% or even the 0 to 60% bracket. So they leave us out.
Affordable housing, right?
Right.
To affordable housing.
And who sits on the boards? But corporate interests and developers. They leave us, the everyday person, out. So this is all more reason. You want to leave us out? Then we build our own table, right? And so this is why we kind of stress all the time, not kind of, this is why we're stressing, get involved in your community council, find out what's going on, because that's really one of the first places that we start hearing about movements that are happening within our neighborhoods, right? Before it was, we start seeing like buildings going up, and by that time it's too late. So we need to know ahead of time what is planned, what planned development is coming through, and our participation in our community council is where we're going to hear that. So highly encourage folks to get involved.
So we do want to make sure that people know that they can get some relief towards housing and other things that you might need, utility assistance. If you go to 513relief.org, I guess they have some vans going around a different place. I think they're in the West End today. They're going out to maybe Mount Healthy or Winton Woods area or something tomorrow. And so you can go to 513relief.org, or you can go to Cincinnati Community Action Agency or any community action agency. If you're watching this in Dallas, Texas, go to your community action agency because they are the ones controlling the funds that were created for relief for folks who lost their job or lost their livelihood because of COVID, specifically in housing. So you want to make sure that you check that out, because you don't want to, it goes all the way back to March of 2020. So if you're a year and 3 months behind on your rent, they can pay all that money and get you up current with that. So please make sure you do that, because this is money that is earmarked for our community. And if our community doesn't use it, then we're losing that wealth, we're losing that value, we're losing that opportunity. And so instead we're relying on ourselves, and we're running thin here, right? Like we don't have the power, we don't have that money, we don't have that influence that we would really need. So please make sure you check that out. We also want to connect with you. So if you're not following This Week at the Coalition, please go to tinyurl.com/HOCO News and sign up for our weekly email that talks about what are all our member organizations doing, what are the policies that they're working on, who are the people that they're celebrating in the community, but also what jobs are available, who's looking for volunteer opportunities, who's looking for donations, right? What events are coming up. So please follow This Week at the Coalition. Obviously, join the Homeless Coalition listserv. You can go to cincyhomeless.org. That's our main listserv. We also have an education listserv as well, but to join our main listserv so that you can know when an action event is happening, what's going on with that kind of stuff, so that we can see that being connected is the only way that we're going to end homelessness, and the only way we're going to make sure our communities are strengthened. I also want to encourage you again to engage in our education programs, whether it's taking a tour, virtual or in person, a speaker, virtual and in person, trainings, virtual for the most part. We haven't done any in-person ones of those, but please sign up for those. And again, we do those with groups of people. You could be a group of friends, it could be a church or a religious group, it could be a school group. We just want to make sure that people have the correct information in front of them. And then also pick up Street Vibes. I have one around here somewhere. The new edition just came out. So if you haven't seen it yet, it's got the cover about Indigenous. There you go. We definitely are checking this out. And then there's also an article in here that I wrote about 9 things that you need to know about homelessness. So make sure you check that out, because I kind of break it down into a few different parts and things that you need to think about. Like there's no market solution to homelessness, right? So we're not going to social innovate our way out of homelessness. We need to change the system that we're in today. So kind of keeping that in mind, those are some ways that you can engage with us, because it is really important for you to do that. The other thing I would encourage you to do is to check out the resources or the sources that that come out in different publications. So if you do check out the Chamber of Commerce's, housing embracing growth principles type thing, if you do check this out, I encourage you to make sure you always look at the sources when they're quoting somebody. Look up that person. Look up what what kind of think tank they're working for. What is the think tank? Is it a right wing think tank? Is it a left wing think tank? Right. So make sure that you're checking your sources, because without knowing what those sources are coming for and what their ideological bent is, you can get in a really disturbing area. For instance, when I was doing the article about hedge funds and how hedge funds are buying and creating single family rental properties, and there's a new thing called a single family rental market where they're building new homes, single family homes specifically to be rental, so that international hedge funds can make money off of them forever. One of the things that I noticed is that I was reading some of the sources and the articles, and I started to see a right-wing bent was saying, well, renters, are bad for neighborhoods. They make neighborhoods dangerous, right? And you start to think, okay, well, maybe. And I was like, well, let me look up this publication, and I found out, right, like, oh, this is a right-wing publication. So you just want to make sure that you're looking at the sources and you're being critical of those sources, because again, as Kelly says, people think that they're so slick, right? So the city thinks they're slick, like, they're going to do this press conference. We're putting all this money towards affordable housing, but not $1 is actually earmarked towards affordable housing. So, we are appreciating your support, Kelly and Key, and everyone else who spoke out here today, Elizabeth and Samantha. We really appreciate your support over the years, and into the future as well. So thank you so much. And Mona, do you just kind of want to close this out here? Just kind of some final thoughts on some of this stuff. To join the community council, all that kind of stuff.
Yep, I think we've kind of emphasized that enough. Join the community council. You know what? And part of this, while we're going through life, right? And I've had to learn recently, take the moments to take care of yourself. It's a lot that we're going through, whether you're going through it personally or not. And so just take moments to breathe, enjoy, right? So we have a weekend that's coming up. Take a moment to do something nice for yourself. Take a moment to do something nice for somebody else, right? And it doesn't have to be big. Maybe it's just opening the door. You have no idea how important that is. The other day, I literally was sitting down trying to have a beer by myself, and someone took over my table. And it was the weirdest thing, and I ended up leaving. But it's little things like that where it's like, you know what? Okay. But I took that moment, right? So take time for yourself, because you never know how much it could affect you physically or mentally, and just enjoy.
Absolutely. Because we know that wealth is health, and that's why we fight for better housing conditions. We fight for stable communities, because we know the impact of homelessness on people's health is detrimental, whether that be mental or physical, and those scars remain forever. So if we can stop anyone from being scarred, from losing their home, that would be a success in my book. So thank you all for the support. Don't forget to like and share this video, even at the end, because it'll be there for other people to look at later on. And we love you all too. So thank you so much for being with us today. And I hope you all have a great weekend, and we will see you soon. All right.
Bye.
Bye.